Welcome back to GearWire.com. I'm Owen O'Malley. We are going to be taking a look at the very unique THD Bi-Valve 30. THD makes the hot plate speaker attenuator. One of those hot plate circuits is actually included in this head, but the Bi-Valve is, like its predecessor, the Univalve, a self-biasing tube head. It's a solid-state rectifier, but there's a tube preamp and a tube power section on this head. We actually featured this head in the crosstalk segment that where we did the power tube shootout. We checked out EL84s, or sorry, 34s, which is what this guy comes preloaded with, 6L6s, KT66s, 6550s. Basically, you can switch out any power tube that is an octet type coupling, and also any preamp tube also, and this will self-bias, so you can get a lot of different, very different sounds out of this one head. We did the sort of tube shootout in that segment of crosstalk. Check it out. In this video, we're just going to be looking more at the amp itself and some of the specific features of the head. First off, all the way over to the left here, we have the input section. You can see it's got a more and a less input. The less input only activates the first tube in the preamp, whereas the more input will activate both tubes, so you'll get a higher gain saturation. It's just a different gain structure. This guy comes loaded with 12 AX7s. Along the controls here on the front, we've got a little switch that is a high cut. Let's just hear what that sounds like real quick. Let's turn the high cut off. A lot more aggressive without the cut. We've got our volume here, which is basically our preamp volume. Now you'll notice right now it's basically dimed, and we're not getting too much distortion, but that is also because we're at the low input setting. If we dial the volume back a little bit, we can get some pretty nice, full, clean tones. Now these are EL34s right now, so you can hear they're still kind of breaking up a little bit, still like a bluesy tone, not a super clean tube tone. That's what 6L6s are for. We've got a two-band EQ, treble and bass, and then something called attitude, which is basically a presence control. Kind of works the same way as the Marshall presence controls. Over here we've got the light bulb. Now the light bulb acts as sort of it's a noise attenuator. If we turn it on, it does change the sound a little bit, and the light comes on when we play. Basically the light coming on means that there's a signal passing through, and the light bulb itself is actually acting as the sort of transistor in this sort of noise suppressor mode. Let's crank the volume here. Well, not much of a difference, but if the light bulb itself actually goes and you have it on, no sound will come out because it won't be going through that circuit. That circuit won't be completed. So you'll actually have to change the light bulb. Let's go back and turn it off. Right here is the hot plate attenuator knob, little chicken head knob. You can actually bypass this by using this switch here, switching to full power, which is very, very loud, so we won't do it right now. But in hot plate attenuator mode, it basically acts as the same way as the standalone THD hot plate. So you get that sort of full preamp and power tube saturation, and then you attenuate it right after the output stage and before the speaker. So it basically acts as your master volume, but it treats your tone a little bit differently than a master volume pot on other amps work. So that's the full power switch. High V and low V switches between high voltage and low voltage supplies. It basically switches how many volts are supplied to the power tube voltage plates. You can actually put 6 V6s in here. They are technically octet tubes, but you need to keep it on the low V setting if you're going to put 6 V6 tubes in here. Otherwise, you'll basically blow them up. Okay, so here's high voltage and low voltage here. This is sort of like a true bypass voltage switch. In the THD booklet, it recommends that you actually switch the amp to standby mode here, which is this second to last switch here, right before the power switch. So if we go to standby, well, let's hear it in high V first. Now let's go to standby, switch it over to low voltage, and bring it back on. So you can hear it's a similar sort of distortion, similar saturation, but it's a lower actual output. Let's switch it back to high V here. Whoop, didn't wait long enough. Anyway, let's take a look at the outputs in the back of this amp. On the back of the head here, all the way to the right, we have our two speaker outs. This amp can handle down to a 2 ohm load. The switch right here switches between 8 or 16 ohm load or a 4 or 2 ohm load. Next to that, we've got actually a balanced direct out and a line level for the direct out. It's a 1/4 inch out, but it can take a TRS balanced signal, so one of those TRS to XLR cables for a balanced direct out. And then we've got our effects loop right here. So now all the tones we've been listening to so far have been in the less input, which only engages one of the preamp tubes. So let's switch it over to high input, or rather more, right there. Put it back on play. Now we are listening to both preamp tubes being saturated, so it's a much higher distortion level, much hotter tone being fed to the power section. Pretty great sound out of this 30-watt Class A self-biasing amp. That is, in a nutshell, the THD Bi-Valve 30. You've been watching GearWire.com, and I am Owen O'Malley. Once again, check out this amp on the latest episode of Crosstalk's Tube Shootout. It'll be Crosstalk 51 Part 3, I believe. Thanks for checking us out. See you around.